English department here. Please allow me to welcome you to the reading by Sara Nicholson, the 2018 Roberta C. Holloway poet. Among the previous Holloway poets are such notable figures as Louise Wick, Michael Palmer, Paul Muldoon, will be here next month, Yusef Komunyakaa, Ann Carson, Mark McMorris, Judith Goldman, Ed Roberson, and many others. Next year's Holloway poet will be Erica Hunt. Let me remind you briefly of the coming Holloway series events. Evie Shockley will be here on October 2nd, which is next Tuesday, and Tom Picard will be here on October 18th. Evie Shockley will also be giving a talk in the Mixed Blood series at 4 o'clock, also on Tuesday, the 2nd of October. In a few moments, Jeffrey O'Brien will introduce Sara Nicholson, the current Holloway lecturer in poetry and poetics. The lectureship came into existence in 1981 through a bequest given to the English department as part of the estate of Roberta C. Holloway, who received her bachelor's degree in English with honors from UC Berkeley in 1923 and her PhD from Berkeley in 1945. Let me talk briefly about Roberta Holloway's bequest. As a poet and, in due course, one with a PhD in English, it was her lifelong ambition to teach, even if only briefly, at her alma mater, UC Berkeley. This opportunity never came to Roberta Holloway. She spent her teaching career at San Jose State instead. But as she reached the end of her life, she decided generously to make such an opportunity possible for other poets. She left what at the time was a fair amount of money to UC Berkeley's English department as a bequest to be devoted to bringing a poet for a semester to Berkeley to teach and enjoy the creative and intellectual culture of the English department's literary community. As required by the terms of the bequest, the committee supervising the lectureship was chaired by Josephine Miles for as long as she was an active faculty member. Josephine Miles, who died in 1985, was the first woman to be tenured in Berkeley's English department. She was a nationally recognized and much honored poet. Here's an offering to the tradition of this event, a poem by Josephine Miles called The Sympathizers. To this man, to his boned shoulders came the descent of pain, all kinds, cruel, blind. Excuse me, let me start again. The sympathizers. To this man, to his boned shoulders came the descent of pain, all kinds, cruel, blind, dear, horrid, hollowed, rained, again, again. To this small, white, blind-boned face, whatever it was, descended the blows of pain. It took, as it were blinded, as it were made for this. We were there. We, uneasy, did not know if it were. Knew neither the reason nor the man, nor whether to share or to beware. Jeffrey O'Brien.
Thank you, Cecil, and thank you, Josephine. The bio on the inside back cover of Sara Nicholson's first book, The Living Method, reads, quote, Sara Nicholson lives in Arkansas. By the time of her second book, What the Lyric Is, the author has grown more prolix and forthcoming. That bio note reads, Sara Nicholson is the author of The Living Method. She lives in Arkansas. We would be right to read these bio notes as radically compressed by modesty, but we might also read them as a refutation of poetry's codes of accomplishment. It would thus be wrong simply to identify the modesty here with a suppression of self. These bios are as full of wit and implied principle as they are short on public and private information. They suggest that what matters is the writing and maybe the place where it is done. They are to a fuller litany of particular achievements and POBI's resume what Arkansas is to the literary ecologies of New York or the Bay Area. In short, they declare ambition by directing attention away from person and career and back to the poems, which are full of persons and the pronouns for lyric speakers, including this moment from her new work in a poem called The Coast, quote, I, the pronoun, the luminous one, whose breakage poems attend to. Nicholson's poetry wants to maintain all the pleasures of lyric speech, its speakerly sources, its tropes and repertoires, its green pastoral suppressions of the social, its contrived I's and U's, reciprocally constituted by the fiction of address, but it can't imagine doing all that without also breaking all those pleasures on the bleeding edge of the present and fuzzifying further the already fuzzy genre of lyric, forcing it to accommodate what it has not had to for most of its history. What the Lyric is, the eponymous poem of Nicholson's second collection, promises to tell us what it is, but ends up merely saying that the lyric is what, especially in the present tense, is of the contemporary. That poem incorporates eddies of iambic rhythm and sportive flashes of pathetic fallacy. Quote, a hoax of golden daffodils obscures, for instance, features both those features. But the poem requires that these brief and only semi-ironic citations of past verse convention, what the lyric was, mingle with what lyric currently is and what our conditions are. Near the end of that poem, it declares, quote, you'll find us trolling the hillsides for wildflowers. Instead of strolling or trawling, Nicholson uses a verb from digital life, trolling, to dematerialize those hillsides and that us. And yet the S is still there at the end of us trolling. We can hear the old verb for physically negotiating hillsides stretched across the end of us and the beginning of trolling. Nicholson's wit and irreverence are sound deep. Like her second collection's title poem, Nicholson's first book seems to offer up a decisive and useful thing, the living method. And yet that method is simply the name of a poem within the volume and never explicitly described. But it still does serious work, suggesting both a method that still lives and a method for living. Both senses converge in the poetry, which makes old methods, meter, genre, and the like, live newly, while offering poetic method and its parsings of experience as a via negativa, a negatively capable defense against the officially approved methods of living, under capital, on the internet, among near and distant others. In the manuscript of her book in progress, a poem titled Via Negativa is followed by one called Arbor Vitae, the tiva of negativa becoming the vita of vitae, the negative road blossoming into a tree of life, which also happens to be the name of a structure in the human brain. Arbor Vitae contains playful and melancholic directions for thinking and moving through this ramifying life, determined by economy and surveillance, but also decked with flowers and the arts. Quote, a crowd began to form in the ill-lit passageways below us. We rose to join them, spotted yew above us and hyacinth below market value, swallows circulating through the air. Let me be clear, no narrative is narrative enough for us who wish to remain anonymous in crowds, who seek logic in non-entity, the Bruegel-esque figures in shade or full sun, facial recognition software couldn't yet be used on, end quote. This is lyric's living method, the rose of we rose to join them, the surveilled second person audibly detectable in a spotted yew, the narrative of no narrative, the logic of non-entity, the rhyme of sun and on. We are lucky to have this non-conservative conservation of the past for vital present purposes, and Nicholson herself, who lives for now in Berkeley. Please join me in welcoming Sara Nicholson.
Hello. Hi. Thank you, Jeffrey. That was really generous. And thank you all for coming. Hi, Amanda. Thank you to the English department for having me, and to the faculty and grad students, and to my own students. who might not realize just how much I appreciate them and what a joy it is to spend time with them every week. So I'm going to start by reading some poems from the first two books and then some new poems. Of minor landscapes. The hypothesis that beauty is nothing but what occurs at night. I'm willing to take my leave of it. I sleep and sleep. And when I look up, I notice how fucked up it is here. Snow positioned in a circumflex, green honey over a violet sea. The animals are clear, the music lacerates them. The field in translation tends to die, just as numbers die. He who brought zero into the elegy never knew grief. I never knew the words for snow, honey, sea. The songs of song. You see what I did there, right? The stars and ourselves are not minor, but impractical. The moon is not a parallelogram, but a creature of metrics. My face died when the sun collided with it. The sun is a ring, but the ring is another kind of ocean beneath the sun. The ocean didn't want to be natural. This time, it wanted sound. For music, I will become a stone. For music, I go signifying after. Of what is not, there is nothing, and of what there is nothing but the contours of trees. A tree is not conventional, it only charms itself. We will spell the words we wouldn't spell, define what appears to us as a song. We is skeletal flowers, the close of night is dawn, dawn, dawn. Artifice, the note that wanders, art, the outer limits of the dark. Pastoral Poem. I can't stand oak, but love the nightingales. The universe was never a conspiracy of trees and grass and light. No data can comfort me, no codex brings me what I need. For my birthday, I would like a river and 100 creeks to swim in, though I'll settle for a voicemail or two. The humanities help us stomach our myths, the spheres of heaven, the circles of hell. In the geometry of reality, only the bright ones fall. The 14th century was a good one for language like this, though it got us nowhere. I hear that the cops hate the word cops, but love fuckheads. For power, the machines desert us. For my birthday, I would like to know why the city turns white most afternoons, with or without the sun. Hider fits nut in the romances. The name of the town is medieval, but its towers are small. The villagers are small, their breasts are made out of turnips. Names make concrete the beauty of form as I walk out among the villagers. The sun does not travel in an arc, but in circles, as if it had wings. That's how it starts, a garden at the center. It begins at the center. The garden of modernity has no fire. The morning moves like I do, only backwards. I say nothing. The faithful say that when the raven falls, it becomes a dove. Okay, I'm going to start by reading the first two poems in this book. So, the first one has all these sort of webs of association for me in different parts of it, like there's a sea cave in it, and I could probably spend at least 10 minutes talking to you about that and what's going on there, but I'll just tell you one thing really quickly, is that for whatever reason, if I read this poem, I have this vivid image of a hand slowly kind of closing into a fist. So if you guys could imagine that too. Or do it. The Middle Ages. There's much I haven't told you about me. I am here reading a book in the dark. My brain has a heart, and the hollowed out top of my skull is green and blue and pink like a sea cave. My heart has a face. It is ugly, like the world is. There is poetry in the word poverty, a flower that is in fact a symbol, that is ancient and difficult and ancient, utterly inaccessible because it is mine. What the lyric is. The wrong words sit beside us where the flesh is heavy. The right words come most easily to those who sleep. I put my boots in a CVS bag because the weather demanded it, and my jacket over the windshield in the morning to confuse the sun. Of mine own life, I'll tell you one thing the internet won't tell you. I wear my hair like a woman sometimes. The project of the snows to put the sky in lo-fi, and the memory of last week's snows a gash in the air. The mountains and seas have a queer look about them. A hoax of golden daffodils obscures them, you might say. I've been told we should pretend that everything we see is real, that images should try as best they can to come to life. I feel that iron should take the place of snow in the literature, and that silk flowers should be manufactured like real ones each spring. I'm reading the letters, distinguished men to you, a broadside of a bad poem on very good paper, a treatise on how to infuse brandy with plums. My fat ass surveys the greensward, and when I step in the manner befitting a person of little station in the world, the dandelions seem to vanish in retrospect, as though to die were just to overlook the rituals that accompany the death and life of weeds, and to throw oneself back into one's roots. I am so big. I mean, my ass is so big. I can't fit in this room I'm building. My ass can barely fit without assistance through the door of this stanza, which is why I invented the pronoun you. The street lamps seem to you to want to break apart the clouds, so we left the city, are always in the process of abandoning the city somewhere. Some days now you'll find us trolling the hillsides for wildflowers, other times sitting at the very center of our garden, Googling beauty with the filter off. This next one is, there's lots of references in it, but there's one reference that I know no one in this room will get, so I'll tell you. It's that in the town I live in Arkansas, there are almost no businesses, but there's this one flea market called Beebe's. And the woman that works there has this bee sitting by the cash register, so I just assumed she was Beevy. So her name's here, right? And after this book came out, I found out her real name is Brenda. So, but she'll never know anyway, so it's fine. False Sir John. Nothing exists in nature but the sign of nature's significance. Even so, I get preoccupied with memory, which like a string of meteoric lights flares up and dies as if to replicate the stars. Memory and philosophy were women. The world was a woman, begotten of chaos, night, and love. I want to be like the woman in Kenneth Anger's Puce Moment, though really I'm like Marcy from Peanuts. Nearsighted, bookish, respectful of authority ad absurdum. Sir, I'm building a vocabulary from the facts of everyday life, emptying the dishwasher, portioning out the day's food for the cats, sorting recyclables, driving to the store for a can of Diet Coke. These were once not proper subjects for the poem, but they have been okay for at least a century or so. Poetry is a way to pretend one can escape the boredom of one's existence, which is another way of saying it makes one feel happy. I've been speaking in prose for 30 years without knowing it. But if I spoke in poetry, would anyone understand me? I opened Henri Frédéric Amiel's journal at random, February 15th, 1874, and read, "Science, reason, justice, all that is best in the patrimony of our race is threatened by the advent of woman, who is all feeling, imagination, caprice, passion, credulity, favor, without respect for the general interest. Meatballs for dinner tonight, and a bottle of wine for the sauce. Poetry is an excuse for alcoholism, which if kept under control is also a way to pretend you can escape the boredom of your existence, which is another way of saying it makes you feel happy. Picking up my husband's clothes from the bedroom floor and hanging them in the closet, watering the garden, watching the sun as it burns a hole in a nest of caterpillars, the look on my face while I'm doing the things I do each day, that's the central image of this poem. The hoopoo from the Conference of the Birds is my pet, as are all the birds in Proverbs and Psalms, the lizards and blue-tailed skink, Plestiodon fasciatus are my pets, though they don't know it. The fish-scale clouds are my pets, and the sun, what can I say about it that hasn't already been said? The force that in fairy tales summons bluebirds to the princess's hand is that same force which in the ballads transforms the supernatural into an omen of violence or death. The greenwood tree where false Sir John, who in the West's collective nightmare, that is, its literature, becomes Bluebeard, kills his maiden seven. The eighth is smarter than the others, either stabbing or drowning him. I think I am going, like Bluebeard, to hell. I get figs from a tree in my backyard, but apples from the grocery store, eggs from BV at the flea market in West Fork, coffee from South America, peppers and tomatoes from my garden. My love for science and language is not a reason for living. Dante is dead. Laura Riding is cultivating grapefruit in heaven. Zinnias grow out of a nail hole in my front door, and on the window there is a tiny comma made of bird shit. Maybe I will never write another book of poems, though even so, I'll court the everyday by turning my back on the abstract. Like a writer of ballads, I'll proofread flowers, paint the lichens, mint or saffron, and edit the green out of landscapes, not to prove to you that any of this matters, it doesn't, but in order to negotiate my heart. Laura Riding really did cultivate grapefruit, like for decades, by the way. After she gave up poetry, that's what she did. I think it's nice. I get it. The cherries on my tree are too sour to eat. The embankment smells like salt, fruit, shit. My hair is black, and so is the sun when I hold it up to it and wave it, my hair, beneath it, the sun. I have faith, I do, in the death of love, and in ivy, how it creeps along the bricks and toward the roof of my house, as if it would, at last, destroy everything. I have faith, I do, in the cruelty of art, a lump on the breast in the minds of poets. I can't think of a good name for what would extinguish the lumps in the minds of poets. I write for myself, for you, for my friends, and of course, for the lump, whatever it is, wherever I might find it. Creased peony bodes something good for the minds of poets, something like immortality for you. My house is gray and the doorknob is broken. My hair is black, my friend's blood is blue. The nut-brown hair of maidens touches the paps of my well-bred sows, and witchgrass settles like a tumor of love beneath my roof. I've never crossed myself in fear of the gentleman-like stars, nor have I beaten myself with a stick of fennel or with a thyrsus transmogrified the earth. The black sun cocked its head toward my ear and profaned my many descriptions of it. So I went inside in envy of personification, and at last I turned away from it. I wanted to sing, so I stopped talking. I wanted to speak, but I had no throat. If I collapse, it's not your fault. You see, I've been designed to. You're immortal, remember, so that means I'm a little more human than you. Now I'm going to read some newer poems. Arbor Vitae. Halfway there, but no further along than when I started, I asked for one more chance at time, as on certain afternoons, outside of work, one might inflame the sharp-toothed leaves with metaphor, spend time watching sound move through rocks in transverse waves, the kind of interruption one welcomes as relief from wonder or pain, a vision, out of focus but gathering in intensity, e.g. heat and learning how it makes glass, iron yielding to the force of autobiography, the familiar pattern of trees and everything. It was 1903 on the veranda, 4 o'clocks against the whitewashed side of a building, darkening up the afternoon, electric lights imported from America to delight the emigres as they wait in gardens for a word from home, anywhere winds are caught eavesdropping on the surface of the water in another time we read about in books. The miraculous forms of nature looked to us like off-season decor, a lost glove, in whose memory a lady prayed to St. Anthony night and day for conversation between bracken and the long grasses she left behind her 20 years before, mislaid in a field somewhere the mind translated to watercolor in retrospect. Early and late, styles pivoting against the day. We saw her on the veranda with a glass of sunflower gin, one glove only. A crowd began to form in the ill-lit passageways below us. We rose to join them, spotted yew above us and hyacinth below market value, swallows circulating through the air. Let me be clear. No narrative is narrative enough for us who wish to remain anonymous in crowds, who seek logic in non-entity, the Bruegel-esque, figures in shade or full sun, facial recognition software couldn't yet be used on because they shared one face among them, disfigured, when summer left its blood mark on the land, in the face of they who make poetry oddly necessary but persist in quailing before it as music moves even the least of these stars we're now able to see from the veranda. Here there are plants of both sexes and fugue notes to co-opt, energy from sound and light. The story of an object, no longer glove but memory, forgotten, left behind her, and in time nothing, hardly ever more of the same. So this poem, the last 2 lines are from Middle English poem, one of the Harley lyrics, and the way that poem is structured is, verse, refrain, so the 2 quoted lines are the last 2 lines of the refrain. Elysiums, she said. Some say Penelope refused to eat, that Agnes fled heaven for the desert to learn how to field a sunburnt rose. Marie let fall her kerchief, frets at laughter. Blanche flirts on fire with numbers. I don't mean to tell a story, leaking out of her to prove that long ago she lived a song. The periwinkle Liz drew in chalk, the light of afternoon erased. Barbara threw herself in the I can't say the word. Mary dared not imitate Christina the astonishing. Failing the oak, she carved her runes on rude, endured a look from Shakespeare's bloated Venus, wet with dew. Call her Rebecca, the loathly lady, or vizier's daughter. Call her Lauren or Kay, she who listened to me tell the fiction in a refrain that from all women my love is lent and light on Allison. Lines heard. I absent myself from fate. A little too often, snowdrops spring upon us yet again, in colors dripped on the grass, which is dead. Whoever'd speak the picture into being, another non sequitur the night falls next to, follows after. For me, it is part of that magic riders see from a train, row houses, kids, and flowers, Amtrak's Northeast Corridor frames, makes art from the linnet seed, cadmium white, dots the earth and trees withdraw in ever smaller numbers, because none of this hurts. The earth itself, because it too lilts uglily, taxes the woods. All systems depend on the end of systematization. In a handful of snow we spring upon each other, collect, a surcharge on the winter air, who spends a lifetime accumulating warmth for us, who are a people in transit toward a destination we don't know. That is to say, I would begin to sing it for you. I'd tell the story, end stopped by snow, the poem of a world without violence. We are capable of imagining a better ending for it, disquiets the sea with rain. This next poem is dedicated to this painter Giovanni Garzoni, who lived in the 17th century and made these really amazing still lifes of just fruit and vegetables, mostly ones that were owned fruit by rich people, right? Who would commission these paintings to sort of celebrate the fruits of their gardens. But she would always put in these weird things like, so there'd be like a melon, right, on the table, and then there'd be some bugs, a lizard, just like a pile of nuts. A porcupine is in one of them, too. And her paintings are really amazing. So, Still Life with Lemons and a Bee, after Giovanni Garzoni. I am a grotto in a Medici garden. I pick apart the sun and my Rebecca at 11 o'clock, 50-odd years after the fact, made a sound. I saw. It was a way of saying a pictura poesis is the real subject here, for those of us who left the earth, pear-strewn, who captured light, tic-tac-toeing the apple as a form of entropy, all forms in disarray, paint but don't see. In the wake of artichoke and lizard, the narcissi, an artist added beetles and flies above, hazelnuts for May Day rioters drawn offhand, a finch's egg on a table by which the horizon let the morning air in, buoyed dusk, the year the pineapple afforded delight to kings who built a zodiac of fruits and vegetables for me to eat in theory, possibly never, to seek in a bowl of melons, if then phrases made visual, if not for me, then us, and therefore yes. I've been writing about art a lot, I don't know why. Museum piece. Each of us travels unto death for recognition. Little else the woods brought forth as dark makes beauty easy, casts up fruit at night and gives the sky a netherlandish aspect, rewarding study, mirroring light, in muted reds and freakish glow-in-the-darks, rare earth blue, reclaiming the horizon for someone else, a subject, the fruits of empire alchemized into the barest hint of cloud, a boar's tusk, a widower, pinned to his ears a defense against poetry, the least low art according to painters who dip their hands and partake of the sea, they who mourn in order to understand the line, I made you a part of me, as time weds grief to genius, as forest stars paint themselves out of existence in daylight, another death rhyming clouds with capital to depict, the fall of the rebel angels, the fleshy Dutch woman Danae in the guise of King. I'm going to read two more poems that are a little longer than some of these other ones. And they're both doing kind of the same thing where they're divided into stanzas, and I wanted the stanzas to have kind of integrity on their own, but also to be able to bleed back and forth in between the rest of them. So I'll try to make an extra pause between the stanzas so you can kind of hear that maybe vertical sweep. 1. Least of all things being equal, the full moon let us down, so gently to see. We were one, yet separate in our separate spheres, two beings wedded to the idea of fake ferns and offices, recycled air, a storm cordoned off for the public, is to stand in line all day to see. We were one yet separate. We're lovers at home or at work. We're workers in a mixed-use complex, lucky to be there, who fell in step irregularly with city time, the here and now, of open spaces set aside for use during daylight, lucky to be anywhere. We were women and men, but also more or less than them. Together we dreamt. We were one yet set apart from the sun. We're invested in bird time the way sailors count their windward losses as blessings, they who read bad weather in configurations of dolphins, wavelets, stars. In sight of land we were one, flesh adrift at sea, yet not, together in the present tense of verse time, utopian theory under the evergreens, we read against the real, feeling of each moment spent apart or together, separately at work or among friends. I evoke myself in secret as we sit together among friends. The you plural I singularly address. The group in formal ways, by using weather terms like rain over downtown, a ballade. We use radar to scan the music of backwards, east to west, through a city and out again. Together or not, alone with all of music, we find each other, bargaining again for time, no time, for the new. We are workers. Both future and past tense bore us who are workers. You, I, together at once, who thirst for wet weather time alone, of all occasions we plural to be. Employed, out of money, but in it together, alone we sing, the state-sponsored harmonies for no one, right to friends, a litany of private terms, now public property a la rain, at song time for everyone. We use all forms alone to make a life of what we're giving be. 2. Direct. No perfect rhyme could stop him looking back for Eurydice, she whose eyes did not consent to variant of syllables so much as the night took it from her, demanded service to abstraction and time for prosody to fail her. The gods did not make light of it. Were Eurydice painted out of the story, were his harp silk woven, not in chord, tuned sharp the way she liked it, at elegy time, no instrument like that which she herself built out of wind, an old wineskin, to gauge it crossing the strings, to no end. She worked hard to carve whole systems of belief from the air, pressed a knife to the strings and watched, me watching her laid out below, the entrance to another world, whose lowest point is drawn from rock, its vertex eucalyptus hollowed out. In every story, she dies composing a prelude to leave-taking in E-flat, the very one we heard the night we saw. An owl had fled midwinter for the pointed roofs and firs of her hometown, farther north than anyone had yet dreamt of crossing over into. Her diary let slip the names of all who live and work to be called up. For service, a kind of beauty, a new leaf working in time to forget itself among the crowd, will summon yet another song, added to over the centuries by all who heard it, like I did, on the radio each morning, on my way to work, Eurydicean lyrics to complete the verse. 3. In bed on my phone I heard it, through the window speak, the name of every woman gone homeward, those who died, fine linen for generations of kings, that I might someday search their labor, shadow them at work, to speak the history of wool spinners. At heart, I might have chosen to join them for a while, before continuing on, no choice, but to submit to the actual lives lived in time by those who never learned to read in the vernacular, girls like Artemisia, who by way of line and color carry back the music to its source in water, underground, beyond a burden of proof to praise, form without content, saintliness without the difficult work of living in the world, beyond the reach of surveillance, as oranges painted on a branch in the mind will surely grow, perfect, ready for display as still life. And here we end. The sun is beginning to edit all feeling from our sentences, as light and sound begin again to commingle and fade with linear time, the mystery art hides from us in common phrases turned idiomatic. We lived. long before quiet was known to cause sickness in animals, before the moon shepherded evil from the wellsprings, the way words escape the mouth too soon, the way one day has ended while another one begins again, no interlude of time to catch our breaths, broadly to speak, before life was killed by rhetoric and men grew programmatic, by men I mean humans, among leaves, sprawled before a harp, playing and open tuning the song of a world no longer extant and sent below us, left nothing for us but to say, return. I'm going to read one last poem. 10 lyric pieces. 1. Blue tunnels upward, and with it green and red speak out. Men never much for idée reçue, confused bees with flowers, took notes on situations that arose from fruit. A darling prospect this, that art would infect us with its bullet points and level sights with words, but that's what it was like, adjuncting, in the year we said we wouldn't. 2. Work. Leisure. Then nightingales to dispute the rain with. Owls, though usually rivals, are blinded by each other's faults, the same as us, who carry ourselves with grace, while working 2 jobs, maybe 3, if we're lucky enough to have one song. A ballad never written down by those who work, yet sing songs by Victorians in paradise. 3, and by us cast aside. The cathedrals of other centuries enchant us with their silence. Aside from us, what people do they wait for to enter them, to forget themselves in entering them, the anarchic ones who work and pray and fight all day for nothing, those women who, in love, embroidered tapestries for the Lord in the year of 4. Me Too, 2018. Will the world be better by the time you read this? Will asphodel return in time for spring? Myself, I think the world of the world, but hope to find it dying. We shouldn't be here, you and I, without calendars to tell us when to reap, sit up, ring bells, and bury peach leaves by the moon to authenticate our experience. 5. Of love we tread the via negativa, the only path through woods as dark as these. Like Peter Abelard, I walked all night and listened to my only ardor steal songs from the treetops. It's a trick I played on nature, our landlord, who rents to us this furnished studio the mind is. It costs so much to live within walking distance of. 6. The moon, Neptune, sorrow. It began with these 3 things, a theory as to why our lives are spent between pleasure and brief absences of pain, coffee on cool mornings with a view of the mountains, before traveling on between cities, on either coast, spending a day at the museum in transit between centuries, epochs, eras, points in space. 7. To wander through, directionless, or to write a dissertation, say, on nightshades, how they echo, brightness back at us and drip, water on the end pages of a book I once wrote or wanted to write but didn't, a Breton lay set in Arkansas, a princess fortnightly summoned up to relieve herself of boredom, a book of poems I will. 8. Not right. Jane, it's Sarah, can you hear me? This might not be the best way to communicate with you. Are you there, Jane? It's hard to read the news. California is yet again on fire. Nothing is happening the way we thought it would. The bay is too expensive for poets. Who cares that flowers grow along the one all year? I'm trying to get you out, Jane. I want a better world for Opal. 9. To grow up in. It takes a lifetime to grow up, which is another question it takes growing up to answer. That time you recognize the drone of crickets as a music worthy of itself alone, a work song native to evening we learn in time to forget the melody of. Like learning how to police oneself in private, it gives more than we take until we 10. Come anew. Thanks.
That was utterly wonderful. Thank all of you for coming. And there is a reception out the door, right turn, left turn, down the corridor in the English department lounge. Please go there. And our friends from those are here. There are books by Sara Nicholson and other people on the table. Thank you very much. I'll see you at Edie Shockley next week. Take care. Bye-bye.